very much. Indian Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons is proud to be associated with the Saudi Orthopedic Association. We and our members will gladly join for the deformity thing in December. In case this pandemic is over, we should be happy to travel there, and we shall be happy to invite you to India, to one of the metropolitan cities, when we host our next annual convention. We have not decided on the dates because we surely don't know when we will be allowed to host 3,000 or 5,000 people together in a large gathering. Pandemic puts it in uncertain, puts us in uncertain times without a clear view of the future. So it's little difficult to fix up the dates till such time that we all meet in future. Personally, ideal meetings would be through these Zoom meetings. I'm exceedingly glad that we had unprecedented number of members joining such a Zoom meeting today. So much so that we have to increase the entry room when the first 100 had already joined and there was no more space for others. I must thank Dr. Abdul Malik for such a wonderful organization. Thank Dr. Nadir for sponsoring on behalf of Saudi Orthopedic Association Deformity Division. And the next talk will be the concluding talk of the session by none else by the famous Muhammad Yunus, who has probably the largest collection of real extreme deformities which have been corrected wonderfully. I would request Dr. Abdul Malik to introduce Dr. Yunus, and
Yes,
then we can proceed with Dr. Yunus's talk.
Okay, Dr. Yunus, are you around?
Yes, I am here. Am I audible?
Yeah, can you share your
Yes,
screen?
sir, clearly audible.
I'm sharing my screen. Is that visible?
Okay, good.
Yes.
So, Dr.
Yes,
Muhammad,
screen is visible.
yeah,
But Yunus, please pause a minute. Let Abdul Malik introduce you and tell details about you.
You want me to stop share or what?
yeah, Dr.
You
Muhammad,
just pause. Abdul Malik will introduce you.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Muhammad Yunus, he is orthopedic surgeon consultant. He has special interest in the basic and advanced trauma care. Also, he has interest in the joint replacement, hip and knee. He has a lot of experience in deformity correction and Alzerov technique. He worked in many centers for deformity correction and Alzerov. Dr. Yunus, can you start your presentation, please?
Yes. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm very glad to be here amidst a group of a plethora of orthopedic surgeons from all around the world. I would like to begin by saying good morning or good afternoon or good evening from whichever place of the world you are listening to. And
Good afternoon.
and
Yeah.
namaste and everything for according to the culture of the people who are listening to this lecture. Today, in this particular lecture, we shall be discussing some practical tips in Ilizero deformity correction. Generally, if you go for Ilizero deformity correction, if you take any textbook, any standard textbook of Ilizero deformity correction, you will be seeing a textbook full of angles and a lot of equations which are difficult to understand. But I would like to give a common sense approach for an orthopedician's viewpoint, so that it benefits at large in the practice. So I would request all the other delegates who are listening to kindly mute your mics unless you are asking a question. Please. Thank you. Let's proceed. So I would like to emphasize the importance of pre-operative preparation before doing any Ilizero deformity correction surgery. You have to have the entire armamentarium ready. You have to have all the types of rings, arches, and the accessories ready. You should not be left in a situation where you are short of some particular accessory, so that you end up giving a compromised result for the patient. So you have to have the entire armamentarium ready before any single surgery, however simple it might be. Then other important question that we have to answer ourselves is, are we following the purest way? Purest way is a methodology followed by surgeons predominantly from Russia, where you use an all-wire construct generally, and otherwise you can follow the hybrid method, which has been advocated by the later European surgeons who took the art of the Russians and spread it over to the European surgeons. So you can use shunt screw construct, which is what we call a hybrid method, or you can call
Dr. Muhammad Yunus. Dr. Muhammad, there is some voice or noisy around you. I don't know. Your voice is not clear.
Voice is not clear?
Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Yes,
Yes, audible now. Just speak loudly. That's all. Clear.
Okay,
clear.
then I'll get the mic closer to me. That should solve the issue.
Yes, you get the mic closer and speak louder. That's all.
Okay. So the thing is, we have to decide. I was telling about how before going into any form of electrosurgery, we have to decide between what form of approach we have to follow. We have to follow the purest approach, which involves an all-wire construct, or a hybrid method, which involves wires as well as shunt screws. And we have to keep all the accessories ready, like an omega ring in a proximal humerus, or a 5i8 ring in a distal humerus, or a proximal knee, or the distal femur. These are the places where these accessories come in very handy, because they end up making a lot of difference between a good result and a bad result. The other question that we need to ask ourselves is, are we following a progressive construct? Are we following a prefabricated frame assembly? Or is there a middle path regimen in between? So if you are following a progressive construct, what we'll be doing is, we have a crooked bone here. We'll be taking the rings individually. We will mount it on the limb one by one, and then mount the deformity correction frame. In a progressive assembly, we take a deformity correction frame built pre-operatively, and we put it exactly on the limb on the table. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of this assembly? And what is a better option for a particular surgeon? So I would like to emphasize that between these two, the best option is always the choice of the surgeon according to his will and his interests. So it's entirely your choice. If you are having a patient like this, a CTEV, if you take a deformity correction frame which has been built pre-assembled, just a mirror image of the deformity, then all that we have to do is just mount the frame on the limb and come out as if we have done just a simple procedure of inserting just wires. But if we end up taking the individual assemblies, the surgery might have taken a longer time, at least 2 to 3 times more time than what would have been done for this pre-constructed frame. This is another patient, a equinocavus deformity. Here, we have taken a frame and there has been no modification. The frame has been inserted just like as it is. It has been inserted into the patient, and all the necessary correction has been done, and the deformity correction can be achieved. So we have to weigh the benefits and risks in our own perspective, not on the perspective of your teachers or of your senior surgeons. What might be good for your senior might be bad for you. So you have to weigh the advantages and disadvantages according to your viewpoint, and then make the decision. So prefabricated frame, these are the benefits. It saves a lot of operative time, and it gives you the benefit of a prior reenactment of the surgery. Just like watching a trailer of a movie before watching the actual movie. So you will not be falling short of certain steps. You will be expecting unanticipated problems on the way. All that can be solved by doing a prior reenactment in the form of prefabrication. And you can see this frame as it is has been put on this limb, and we have achieved a complete correction. The other advantage is, if you are doing a new procedure, altogether new procedure, like for example, this is a new frame that I had designed for calcaneal fractures. So if you take it prior, before actually doing the surgery, if you make a prior reenactment, then it will help in properly doing the surgery and getting a blueprint of the surgery before proceeding into the actual surgery. Like for example, if it's a femur fracture, this is a trauma femoral frame if you're using an all-wire construct. This is a trauma femoral frame if you're using a hybrid construct. This construct can be just kept over the patient, over the injured limb, or the contralateral limb, and a pre-operative templating can be done so that you get an idea of what all can be expected to go wrong during the surgery. But the problem is, if a small error happens in that prefabricated frame, then you might risk doing a lot of adjustments during the surgery. You will have to disassemble all the parts, then again assemble it, leading to furthermore increase in the duration of the surgery. and it is almost impossible in most of the times to foresee all necessary modifications. So unless you are very clear about the execution of the various steps of the surgery, you cannot go ahead with a complete prefabrication in mind. So you might have to disassemble and reassemble if the patient's limb is on traction. So if there is a traction, you can't put the frame into the limb from the end of the limb. If it is without traction, you can just mount the ring over the injured limb. But if it is on traction, you will have to disassemble it, make it into 2 or 3 parts, then assemble it again over the limb. So these are the various disadvantages. Progressive construct, the benefits are you have the benefit of going with an open mind. That is a big benefit altogether, and you do not have to make corrective steps during surgery. And if you are very busy in your pre-operative day, you are doing a lot of OPD or you are busy with other surgeries, then it saves a lot of pre-operative planning time too. But the problem is you always expect to have prolonged operative time, and you need to carry. Assume, for example, your anesthetist comes here with a sand clock like this, and he keeps asking you how long is the surgery going to take. Then it's better to go with the prefabricated construct. And for even a simplest surgery, you have to take the entire armamentarium with you so that you do not get caught during the surgery. And always consider the fatigue of the surgeon while doing electrosurgery, fatigue of the surgeon, fatigue of the surgical team before performing any way of doing electrosurgery. So I would suggest most of my juniors to follow a mid-path approach that will do best of both worlds. The thing is, if this is a progressive construct, you can put all the assembly on the limb after insertion of the wires, or you can go with a prefabricated frame like this in a trauma or a deformity situation. But a middle path approach involves prefabricate a frame, then disassemble it into 2 or 3 smaller parts, then assemble it on the table. That is a mid path approach that carries the benefit of both the best of the both worlds. Now, I always consider my orthopedic surgeon colleagues to soldiers from the Greek city of Sparta. You see, Sparta is a city from ancient Greece, and the soldiers of those country, that particular city, are famous for their bravery. And whenever they face an enemy in battle, they do not ask how many of the enemies are there standing against us. They only ask you where the enemy is. That is the bravery. So the Spartans do not ask how many are there, but they ask where they are. Similarly, the orthopedic surgeon always has the eye on the ball. Eye on the ball. This is a famous adage in baseball sports. The coach always says, "Have the eye on the ball." And here, the patient is throwing the ball at us. Deformity is the ball that the patient is throwing at us, and the surgeon, that is the person holding the bat here, is a surgeon. All that he sees is the crooked bone. He does not see the whatever is around it. Like in India, there is a famous epic tale called Mahabharata. In Mahabharata, there is a famous archer by the name of Arjuna. I hope, I'm sure the Indians would know it, but I'm not sure the people from other country might not be aware of this particular character from this famous epic. This Arjuna is a famous archer, and whenever he fires an arrow, or he looks at the bullseye of the target. He says, when asked to shoot on a bird, what does he look at? He does not look at the bird. He does not look at the branch the bird is sitting at, but he looks at the eye of the bird. That is exactly what exactly should be the attitude of an orthopedic surgeon when looking at the crooked bone. And we are all aware of the 10 commandments, which is very famous in Judeo-Christian and Abrahamic religions, in Islam and in Christianity. But an orthopedician has to follow 11th commandment. What is that? Thou shalt mend every crooked bone. So orthopedician's life is very simple. He does not bother about talking too much complexities. He sees a crooked bone, he wants to make it straight. That is what is the benefit of that he can offer to a patient in problem. So thou shalt mend every crooked bone, and the scope of today's topic is to mend every crooked bone. So crooked bone can be as simple as a green stick fracture like this, or as complex as a deformity like this. So practically speaking, the scientific approach behind both these are the same. So we are going to mend it. That's all. Some Feltman markings have appeared on the screen. Can that be undone? Is it possible? Excuse me.
One of the participants is using a whiteboard.
Can that be undone, please?
Please, Dr. Abdul Malik.
Yes,
Abdul
yes.
Malik, you are the host. Some of a participant is using a felt screen to mark on the screen, trying to disrupt our meeting. You have to
That
ask
can be
him
undone, it will be better.
you have to remove that member or remove that. You are the host, you can only do that.
Shall I proceed otherwise?
You can proceed, let it be on the screen until Dr. Abdul Malik asks the participant to remove those marks.
Okay. So the
Somebody
scope
has
of
put
today's
a
topic.
chalkboard and is making marks on a chalkboard.
One more new mark is appeared now. Anyway, so the scope of today's topic is how to mend every crooked bone. So crooked bone can be due to various reasons. It can be due to a fracture that has appeared acutely, or it can be due to a deformity that might have appeared gradually. So a fracture needs to be corrected as in a situation where we acutely reduce the fracture and a fresh fracture, or a mobile non-union where we will be reducing it acutely and fixing it by whatever method of your choice. But sometimes if it is a stiff non-union, or if it's an old fracture, it might need a gradual reduction. So all the situation needs to be addressed. Similarly, in deformity, we have two situations. We can either have an acute correction scenario or a gradual correction scenario. So in fractures, generally what we follow is we give a traction. It can be calcaneal pin traction, upper tibial pin traction, or a boot traction with a fracture table. You have various method of fracture tractions on the table. We also use ring-induced traction before the upper limb fractures. The ring can be just held on the hand and just given traction for humerus fractures, for forearm fractures. If you're doing any percutaneous procedure, you can also use a olecranon pin traction, as you can show in this case, and followed by traction. What happens? The fragments generally fall into place. A general alignment is achieved, followed by the insertion of wires and half pins. So these wires and half pins will gradually reduce the fractures and hold it in reduction. So we have basically, this is the frame in any particular fracture or non-union. We have a proximal basic module, we have a distal basic module, then we have proximal reductionally transfixing module, a distal reductionally transfixing module. So these can be used in a systematic manner to achieve a completely straight bone and thereby fulfilling the 11th commandment that we have taken upon ourselves, that is to mend every crooked bone. If the patient's limb is generally smooth, it's always better to use rings of the same size. But if it is obese on the proximal region and thin on the distal region, like in this case, you will have to use rings of various sizes and connect them with short connecting plates. Always when inserting wires, you have to make sure that these wires are not causing reduction in the range of motion post-operatively. We have to make sure the safe corridors are followed, and thereby ensuring complete range of motion even after fixing the most complex of all deformities. So you will have to make sure that the range of motion is preserved at the end of the surgery. That is very important. And the next step would be to use reductionally transfixing assembly. So you will be facing a lot of situations, like you might be left with the translation, you might be left with the rotation, you might be left with the angulation, you might be left with the shortening. How do we correct individually each of these? So if there is a translation, for example, if there is a situation like this where the fracture fragments are away in a translated manner like this, so how do you correct it acutely? So if the distance between these two rings has to be measured. Assume the distance here is A. You have to make sure that you add a sufficiently long short connecting plate here so that that distance can be equalized here, and obliquely introduced rod, when gradually tightened, will lead to spontaneous reduction of the translation. This is how we achieve translation correction acutely. Like for example, in this case, you have short connecting plates here that are helping in pushing the distal fragment of the femur onto the proximal fragment, thereby achieving a good reduction. If we want gradual translation correction, how do we do it? We use what is called horizontally placed rods here with a translational correction assembly like this. Like for example, this is a distal tibial fracture, an oblique fracture, which has a translational malalignment. So here we have used horizontally introduced short connecting rods. These rods, when tightened gradually, will lead to correction of the translational deformity. How do we correct rotation, either abruptly or gradually? If you want to correct abrupt correction of rotation, we connect these rods in this manner in an oblique fashion. You can see the whole of this ring is not been connected to the whole of the subsequent ring. We have taken one ring extra, one hole extra. That will give a unturning of the rotational deformity, thereby achieving the rotational correction. This can also be achieved by gradual correction if we are using a assembly similar to the translation correction assembly, but in a counteracting manner. This goes this way and this goes this way. That will lead to a correction of rotational correction. This is the patient with the fracture shaft femur non-union. Here you can see that this patient has undergone an interlocking nail, and this was subsequently dynamized, but still the fracture ended up in non-union. It's an oligotrophic non-union. What do you see in this particular X-ray? Can I have some answers from feedback from people who are listening? What is that particular deformity that we see here? Hello? You can see that the interlocking nail.
Pankaj, oh, sorry, Yunus.
Yes.
I have now cleared that blue line. You have to stop sharing and start sharing again. The yellow line will disappear.
Okay, I stop share now.
Yes. Now again you start share, it will disappear. I have now given power only to you to share screen.
Okay.
Nobody else can share screen now.
Good. Now it is.
Previously, Dr. Abdul Malik had given option for anybody to share screen.
Okay, that's good.
So somebody had put a blackboard and whiteboard and put a line on that.
Thank you, Dr. Abdul Malik and Dr. Prakash. Yes, now it's much better. Now you can see this particular X-ray. This is the AP view of the X-ray. You can see that the screws are like this. But if you see in the lateral view, the patient is having so much of rotational malalignment in the mid shaft that what looks like AP in the proximal femur looks lateral in the distal femur. So it's almost a 90-degree rotational deformity that we can see. But to quantify the exact amount of rotation in a femur, rotational malalignment in a femur, we need to have limited cuts in a CT scan. You can see, you can just take 2 proximal cuts, 3 distal cuts, and that should solve the line along the transepicondylar axis will show the exact quantity of the rotational deformity. So how do we correct it? In this particular patient, we are having around 37.5 degrees of rotational deformity. So how do we correct it? So we are using an 18 centimeter ring here, 180 millimeter ring. Generally, these rings have 48 holes. Taking into account the 3 holes at the junction, these holes are actually not filled with holes, but counting 3 holes for that particular junction, it will be a total of 48. So 360 degrees will be 48 holes. So how do we get 37.5 degrees? Like for example, if you can buy 5 apples with, you can buy 48 apples with 360 rupees, then how much can you buy with for 5 apples? Then you need 37.5 rupees or real or whatever you are following. So you need a 37.5 degree correction. So all that we need to do is move 5 holes and keep the rod obliquely. Then as you correct it, tighten it, then you will automatically correcting the rotation and deformity. Rotational correction can also be done with wires. Like for example, if you insert a wire like this, then shoot it to the subsequent holes, then it will give an automatic correction of induction of the rotation into that particular assembly. And you should also do reductional transfixation in fractures with our wires. You can use a wire like this with an olive wire or a console wire. I'll show you some examples. Like for example, we have a fragment here. We want the fragment to move from this point to this point. So how do we exactly do it? We just pass an olive wire like this, park the olive on the cortex of this side, and just pull this olive wire from the opposite side, and the fragment beautifully falls into the place, and the fragment goes into the point that we want. But assume there is a important artery in this place or a neurological structure here. The safe corridor does not permit you to insert this wire. How do we do it? We pass a wire through a safe corridor first, then keep the olive on the right particular point and arch the wire according to the need we have. Like for example, we have done here, then pull it gradually. Then you correct the deformity in 2 axes, in y-axis and then in x-axis. This is a patient with Monteggia fracture dislocation. This is a fracture which is almost 6 months old. You have an oblique non-union in the ulna with a dislocated radial head. So how do we treat this? Here we have a combination of deformities. You have an angulation deformity. If you look at the AP view, you have a translation deformity. If you look at the lateral view, you have a translation deformity if you consider the radial head also into mind. So this is the actual pencil sketch that I had made before the surgery. Here, to correct the deformity, we are using olive wires and counteracting olive wires according to our need. What exactly have we done? We have introduced a frame, and counteracting olives are introducing compression across the oblique non-union here, and olive wire is reducing the radial head into the capitellar fossa. And when these two olive wires are pulled like this, it is beautifully correcting the angulation along with induction of the translational correction. So this is how we use olive wires in such a manner that it gives translational correction in one axis whereas an angulation correction in another axis. So this is the gradual compression that we are giving, and with the pull of the slotted threaded rod here, we are inducing compression here, and this is the beautiful reduction that we have achieved at the end of the day. The radial head is reduced into the capitellar fossa, and the union has been achieved with preservation of the forearm anatomy. Reduction and transposition can also be done with half pins, with console wires. All these are details which any orthopedic surgeon who is practicing laser surgeon should know. Now, when we are following deformity, there is a complex deformity. Like for example, there is rotation, there is translation, and there is angulation. So how do we correct it? There are three situations here. First is if we are doing an acute correction. The order we should follow is rotation, followed by translation, followed by angulation. Because always when we correct rotation, since the bone will not be usually the center of the limb, it most often than not lead to induction of some extra translation deformities. So always we have to correct the rotation first, then do the translation correction, then get the alignment properly in translation axis, then do the angulation correction. If we are doing it gradually, then the first order will be to do the angulation correction first along with lengthening, because angulation correction alone without lengthening has a problem that I will show you in a few subsequent x-rays, followed by rotation and followed by translation. But if we are generally following a combined correction approach, then what we do is we do acute correction of rotation first, then acute correction of translation, then gradual correction of length and angulation. So this is a very important x-ray. This slide is this particular slide that I'm showing you is filled with text. There's no picture here, but it's very important that all the delegates here understand this particular issue so that it becomes easy for us to understand in subsequent case discussions. Like for example, let us discuss a simple angular deformity. We all know the various lines here, the cora that we have been said, the bisector axis, the angle of deformity and all that. But for orthopedic surgeon, a book filled with so many diagrams filled with angles and trigonometry calculations and formulae, this does not interest an orthopedic surgeon. After all, we have stopped learning mathematics in our school days itself. So to have such a complex discussions in trigonometry does not generally suit the mind of a, practically speaking, for a mind of an orthopedic surgeon. So we generally get confused. So how do we make it simple so that our orthopedic mind easily understands it? So how do we make it simple? So we just want simple questions and answers to the simple answers to those questions. I said already, the orthopedic surgeons are like Spartan soldiers. They do not ask you complex questions. They do not ask you how many enemies are there, what kind of weapons do they have. No, just ask you where are the enemies. I will just go and attack them, win over that situation. That is how an orthopedic surgeon practically behaves. So we have to tailor make the situation according to the surgeon. So he asks a question: where should I put my hinges? That is what is that damn question that is being asked by an orthopedic surgeon. So he does not bother about all the complex deformities and the calculation and all that. He is doing the surgery. He has to put a hinge at some place, and that is a very important $1 million question. So that has to be answered first, and he wants the answer desperately. So if you are doing a hinge joint, there are various forms of hinge joints. We all know the hinge, the post, all that is has been already talked to you about, and we have to use those hinge joints intelligently so that it becomes useful in our deformity correction. So I told you these angles and bisectors are confusing for an orthopedic surgeon. What does the orthopedic surgeon see? He just sees this small blue dot that you are seeing here. You can see this is called the cora, center of rotation of angulation. But what is cora? It is like the eye of the bird that the archer is going to see before he shoots the arrow. So he's just seeing at the cora, and he wants to know where does he want to put the hinge. He can put the hinge on this point. He can put the hinge on this point. He can put the hinge here. Or to make it more complex, he can put the hinge further like this here. He can put the hinge here. So how do we know exactly where to put the hinge? That is the question that the orthopedic surgeon, the innocent orthopedic surgeon, the brave orthopedic surgeon, he wants to know, because he wants to do the surgery after all. He doesn't want to sit and read a lot of textbooks. He doesn't want to do a lot of trigonometry calculations. He wants to just answer a simple question, do a surgery, simply come out and offer the patient what is best that he can offer. So if we put the hinge on the center, then we got what is called a neutral wedge. How do we do the neutral wedge? We select a small heavy wedge from the concave side, convex side, and transfer it to the concave side. Then you do a neutral wedge. This does not change the length of the bone. If you had put the hinge on the convex side, that will lead to an opening wedge. Opening wedge leads to net lengthening of the bone. If it has been put, the hinge has been kept further away from the convex side, it will lead to an open trapezium. So that will lead to net lengthening on the both concave and convex sides, along with correction of the angulation deformity. But if the hinge has been placed on the concave side, you will have to do a close wedge, you have to resect a wedge. And if you have put the hinge further away from the concave side, then you will have to resect a trapezium of bone, leading to further more shortening. You can see as we move the hinge from convex to concave, you are getting more and more shortening here. Similarly, this is a situation where the hinge can be placed either proximally or distally. That is to make the situation more complex. This is a diagram from Sir Abramovich Elizarov's own textbook. Here, he is discussing about all the angles and the translation correction that he is trying to bring forth, along with the correction of angulation. So this is a situation where we are correcting both angulation and translation. So how do we make it more simple? I don't want to discuss more of angles and all that. So to make it much more simple, assume we have a situation like this. There is an angulation along with the translation. This is another place where there is an angulation along with the translation on the opposite side. So how do we make it much more simple? We want to know the simple answer for a simple solution. Here, first we have to understand what is the concave side of the deformity, what is the convex side of the deformity. You all appreciate this is the convex side, this is the concave side. This is the convex side, this is the concave side. But there is a translation along with it. How do we address them? Here, we follow a common sense approach. We mark a line along the lateral margin. We are not bothered about plotting the cora here, because plotting cora in the presence of translation deformity usually makes the situation much more complex than what is already there. So we plot a line along the lateral cortex on the convex side on both the lines, and you can see there is an intersection point here. So if there is a translation here, the intersection point is proximally, and if the convex side lines are connected here, the intersection point is somewhat here, distally. So that is the point where we will be placing our hinges. For example, if I place the hinge here, this will lead to automatic correction of the translation and angulation. I'll show you in a bit. You can see I'll do up and down. You can see this is how we do the deformity correction. Along with translation, we are correcting angulation, thereby achieving a net correction of the length. And here, when the translation is on towards the convex side, we will have to do the deformity correction like this. The hinge has been placed more distally, and this is the point where we have to place the hinge. So we are not bothered about much complex situation. We just plot the line along lateral cortex and get the point of intersection, and we just place the hinge. So we just want answer to that simple $1 million question, so that we end up giving the best possible result for any deformity correction scenario. If you are having a situation where there is, since you have understood what is correction of angulation, then now correction of angulation and translation. Now let's make it little more complex. Presence of angulation, translation, and shortening. So here what we do is we just place the hinge little more outside to the convex part. Thereby, if you keep it here, we just achieve translation, correction of angulation and shortening. But if we keep it here, we achieve net lengthening also, thereby creating an open trapezium. You can see here, this is leading to the correction of angulation, shortening, and translation simultaneously or just intelligent placement of the hinges? So this is what a surgeon needs to answer. Let us discuss some cases so that the situation becomes much easier. This is a patient with a bent tibia here, a malunited both bone leg fracture, a mid third. You can see that there is also some translation in this particular case. So how do we do it? When you are presented with this X-ray, we should know that the joint line are here. We make a mental image of the cora here, but all that we see is just this bent point. You see, the cora does not fall into the actual point of the deformity; it is falling below the deformity. And where or just on the convex side of the cora? Yes. Here, if we keep the hinge on point A, just at the cora, what will happen is we will be getting a net, no net lengthening or shortening. We'll be getting just deformity correction. But if we have it in point B, then we will be having lengthening along with the correction of the angulation. If you have it at point C, we'll be having net shortening along with the correction of the deformity. So here, since the patient has actual shortening here, we are choosing to do medial cortex. If you keep it proximally, then what happens? Keeping it proximally leads to correction of translation according to the situation that we have. So here we are choosing point P here, where we'll be getting net lengthening correction along with our correction of the shortening. So this is how the preoperative planning works. We'll be having perpendicular transosseous modules of the proximal transosseous module, and the distal transosseous module has to be placed perpendicular to the mechanical axis, and the hinge has to be placed further convex from the cora so that we get the best possible correction. So this is the dichotomy that we have done. We have placed the hinges further to the convex side, and we have kept the distraction motor exactly opposite to the deformity, and we are gradually doing the deformity correction, and now we have got the complete correction of the deformity. You can see the cora is still at the right place, and you can see the joint line and all the lines are almost perpendicular. And you can see that we have created an open trapezium of new bone regenerate here, thereby leading to equalization of both the limbs in the AB axis and in the lateral axis. So this is the after the complete correction of the deformity. You can see that these two rings have fallen parallel to now after having achieved the complete correction of the reduction. So now we can even change the remove the distraction motor here made of our distal plates here so that it does not hit the opposite side link. You can change it into a simple threaded rod here like this, connecting the both parallel rings here. Now, let us take our situation much more complex. Here we are having a patient. This patient is a 33-year-old female. She has genu valgum. There has been childhood trauma at the age of around 14 years, and there has been growth plate arrest. You can see that there is valgus in multiple levels. You can see on plotting the limb axis, you can see there is a cora in the distal femur, there is a cora in the proximal tibia. There is a marked angulation in the distal femur, there is a minimal angulation in the proximal tibia. So how do we go about in this case? Here we have known the cora. We have got the two coras. That is, these are the 2 points that the surgeon sees. Nothing else we are bothered about. We only bother about the 2 places. And now we want answer to our question that we usually ask. What is it? Where do we put our hinges? So, do we put our hinge here, or here, or here, or here, or here? So, according to the various situations, we have various results. So now here, since we want an open wedge here, we will be ending up putting it in the point B. And for the proximal, and what type of an osteotomy do you want to do? If you are doing an osteotomy at the level of the cora, you will end up getting a very small medial condylar fragment, lateral condylar fragment. That is not good for fixation. So we can even willingly make an error of doing the osteotomy away from the cora. We can do osteotomy away from the cora, but still expect good correction as long as our hinges are properly placed at the level of the cora. So we are purposely making an open wedge osteotomy in this place, and we are doing a closed wedge osteotomy. We can do some other osteotomy here. What do you want to do here? You want to do a closed wedge osteotomy here, or a hemi-wedge osteotomy here, or a dome osteotomy here. We can do either of these, but as long as we are having the cora at the right place, we should have good results. So here we have chosen dome osteotomy, inverted dome osteotomy for this particular case. And here you can see that such a gross deformity can be corrected with properly applied frame. Now this is on the table. Here we have applied the entire frame here. We have done acute correction of the proximal tibial deformity by doing a dome osteotomy here, and a gradual correction of the distal femoral osteotomy assembly with hinge assembly here. Now you can see that the cora has been placed properly, and the hinge has been parked at the right place, and you can see that the deformity is being corrected gradually here. For the proximal tibia, we have done a dome osteotomy and we have done an abrupt correction, thereby leading towards straight tibia. This is the final result that we are having. At the correction of the deformity, you can get mild translation because we have got the osteotomy proximal to the cora, but still, since the hinges are on the right side, you can still expect good results. So this is the final result here, and this is after consolidation of the union. This is another situation. We have a patient with a distal tibial delayed union or a non-union. This is almost 6-month-old non-union here. Here you can see that there is angulation, there is valgus angulation of the distal tibia and fibula. There is also migration, proximal migration of the fragments, and there is also translation. So we have 3 situations we have to address here: translation, angulation, and shortening. So how do we manage it? With a single intelligent placement of the hinge. So we can do it by with the help of computerized software when you are following Taylor's station frame and situations like that. But you will end up correcting the deformity with the help of a software, but we will not know how exactly the deformity got corrected. But I would suggest my colleagues here who are listening to this lecture to use their supercomputer that the God has given us. It's much more superior than the best supercomputer on earth. So we have to know what exactly is happening because of our movements of the nut. We should not expect a computer to tell us, right, tighten 3 turns here, 4 turns here, 2 turns here, end up getting a straight limb. But we do not know how exactly these turns lead to the achieving of the straight limb. So we have to know the principle beforehand so that we can use the God-given computer, our cerebrum, so that we can, which is much more superior to any software on earth, so that we get the best possible correction. I told you, like, if you plot the cora here, the cora falls into some wrong place. So it's better not to follow cora here. We will follow the lateral cortical approach of the convex side. You plot a line along the lateral cortex of the distal fragment, you plot another line along the lateral cortex of the proximal fragment, and put the hinge in that place. This is our assembly. 2 rings for the proximal tibia, 1 ring for the distal tibia, and this is our hinge. Since we are taking a prefabricated frame, we are not going to have much of hassle during the surgery. We just have to insert the wires, come out, gradually do the deformity correction in the post-operative period. So that is what we are going to do here. When this patient is lying on the operating table, all our patient's attendants are seeing a crooked bone here. But the orthopedic surgeon's intelligent mind, he looks at the joint line, he gets a mental X-ray on the table, he looks at the cora, he looks at the exact point where the deformity is happening, and he wants the answer to this question, which he usually asks at the deformity. Just answer my question of where do I put my hinges. So here he is putting the hinges according to the lateral cortical approach. He is placing the hinge here. That's what we are doing here. The hinge has been placed here. Since it is coming outwards and a little more proximally, it is leading to correction of the translational correction, angulation correction, and correction of translation. But since in this particular case, there was a slight problem which I would like to tell you.
You know, you've got only 5 minutes more.
Okay. So
go fast.
Yes. So if we are doing a translational correction along with rotational correction, we might be left with some amount of residual translation here. Then how do we correct it? How do we correct the residual translation? We introduce the translation correction assembly at the end of the angulation correction, and we gradually do the translation correction with the help of this assembly, and thereby achieving complete reduction of movement and straight limb with the help of is the final result that we have. The patient is walking, though the assembly looks crooked, the limb is straight, and the final result is excellent. Now let us go into more complex situations. Assume a situation where there is angulation, shortening, angulation in two axes, in both sagittal and coronal axis, and also shortening along with rotational malalignment. This is a patient with epiphyseal arrest. There is rotational malalignment. There is gross shortening here. There is varus and procurvatum deformity. So how do we correct it? Here, if you plot Cora, we get one particular point if you consider the rotation away. But there is multiple problems you have to manage. So this particular case, such cases need a lot of intelligent approach here. We just can't follow blind principles of deformity correction. So here we are following a combined correction approach. Here we are resorting to acute correction of rotation, acute correction of translation, then followed by gradual correction of length and angulation. So how do we do it? This is our assembly here. A proximal tibial assembly comprising of a 5/8 ring and a full ring, and a distal tibial assembly comprising of 3 full rings, of which one of the rings will be using it as a orphan ring. Here, after correcting the angulation, rotation and translation, we are converting the varus into a procurvatum. Here you can see that there is a varus has been corrected completely, almost by 90 degrees, and whatever was procurvatum has become whatever was varus has become a recurvatum now. So now we are left with a gross amount of 60 degrees of angulation here, and there is short. So how do we correct it? Am I muted or what?
No, you are muted. Others are muted. Once more, ask the question.
Okay, fine. So now, after correction of
it's not interactive. It's not interactive.
After correction of the varus angulation,
all the support keep the thing.
Hello, I'm not clear here.
You are clear.
So in this
all
particular case,
are muted.
In this Cora here, and we have done 2 fibular osteotomies here, as you can see here, and thereby we are getting a complete correction of translation and varus deformity along with correction of rotation. Now what we are left with? We are left with recurvatum and shortening. So how do we correct it? So recurvatum and shortening have to be corrected simultaneously. We cannot correct one after the other, because generally if you do angulation correction, the convex cortex, since it is not distracting much, it will lead to premature consolidation of the regenerate before we start lengthening. So we have to do lengthening simultaneously along with the correction of translation. So what have we done here? We are doing lengthening between these 2 rings, and we are correcting angulation correction with the help of this motor here at this hinge. So we are creating an open trapezium here, and we can get the gradual correction here and leading to complete correction of the deformity and creating an open trapezium of regenerate here. If you straight, tibia is straight in both axes. There is no rotational malalignment. There is no translation. There is no angulation. So this is the final result. What we have had here has become like this. So I would not go further into deformity correction. There is much more complex things to address, but I would and open the floor for discussion so that we can answer questions here, so that we can make this discussion more interactive. Thank you everyone for that kind listening here, and I thank the Majma University and the Saudi Arabian Orthopedic Association for the wonderful invitation that has been given to us graciously, and I would like to request the host to throw the floor open for discussion. Thank you.
Could you please unmute your sorry, thank you.
Yes, any question please for the all speaker? You can raise hand or write in chat the question. If there is any question from the
anybody else wants to ask any questions? I am going to add pin and Dr. Yunus, Dr. Kirpat, all the faculty will come on